loud. All right, well, we'll get started here. Good morning. It's great to see everyone. My name is Grace Corrigan, and I am the employment specialist at INCIGHT. And as you heard, we are recording this session today. Feel free to keep your cameras on, but please mute your audio while listening to minimize background noise. And then after the presentation, we will open the workshop up for questions. You're also very welcome to type your questions in the chat, and we will address them as soon as possible. Also, if you're a transition teacher here today and you have a classroom full of students, please add your school name and the number of students attending in the chat. So before we start, I would like to just share a little bit about INCIGHT. Our mission is changing hearts and minds, leveraging obstacles, and unlocking potential. We do this through our education and employment programs, which focus on helping individuals with disabilities and barriers. If you'd like to learn more about our programs and services, please visit our website. It's insight.org, that's with a C, or you just go ahead and give us a call. So jobsnow.org is part of our employment program. And one of the ways we connect with job seekers is through these Get Ahead events, which are standalone workshops created to give job seekers of all abilities additional tools and resources for their job search. If you'd like to watch past Get Ahead events covering essential job seeking skills, you can visit our website, which is jobsnow.org, and click on the Get Ahead tab. So INCIGHT also hosts in-person job fairs, and our next event is on Tuesday, March 25th in downtown Portland. And you can register for this event already on our website, jobsnow.org, but I'll also be sending out an email in the next couple of days with an advertisement and registration link. So our workshop this morning is titled Inclusive Growth, Leveraging Accommodations and Transferable Skills. And it is my pleasure to introduce Balch and Ryan Farrow from Nike. And I'm sorry, I think it's Matthew. I hope I didn't mess that up.
Either one.
Matthew and Ryan. Welcome, gentlemen. And I will now hand the workshop over to you.
Awesome. Well, let me get this up and ready to present.
Well, I can be the verbal hold music. It's just nice to see a lot of familiar faces in this group. So many of you I've gotten a chance to work with on campus, but also I noticed several people I've met at the INCIGHT events in the past. So it's just nice to see you.
Good, great.
Yeah. Awesome. And is that at full screen for everyone?
It's still showing the window instead of the presentation fully. I'm not sure if that's.
Let me see. There we go.
There we go. Got it.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, I'll start and just do a brief introduction about myself and kind of my background in the recruiting space. My name is Matthew Balch, and I technically work for the university recruiting. So I get the pleasure of helping undergraduate and MBA students find internships within Nike. But when those internships are filled, I get the opportunity to lean into our other business functions and help with full-time recruiting as well. So I get kind of a diverse slate of talent that I get to work with to help find homes for their talents here at Nike. I've been in the talent acquisition and recruiting space for just a little over 8 years, which is crazy to say. It's been quite the journey. And that ranges from creative recruiting to technical recruiting. And now I get to dive deep into early careers. I'm so excited to get the opportunity to talk with you guys today a little bit about the application process, from how to build out your resume all the way through interviews and how to put your best foot forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. I love your profile picture, by the way, too. Yeah, so hi everybody. My name is Ryan Farrow. I am the program lead for Disability Employee Experience on our Accessibility and Disability Inclusion team. That team is within our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion team, which also is within our Nike HR function, which is a large part of Nike as well. There's a big HR team. Um, my role on this team is, disability employee experience. Really, it doesn't tell you the full scope of it, obviously, but I can tell you, which is really the full kind of talent life cycle as it pertains to, talent. So whether that be from the moment that somebody's considering applying and looking at Nike, I'm involved in conversations with the teams who are creating the communications that are going out and the kinds of content that's being created to talk about that Nike is an inclusive place to work. And then also work really heavily, which I'll talk about today, with our accommodations team, how to create as seamless as possible processes around accommodations in the interview process and also in the employment when you become an employee as well. And do a lot of training and awareness, and then also get a chance to support disability hiring programs around the world as well. My background is actually in supported employment, and I started about 15 years ago as a part-time job coach out of college. And for me, working in the nonprofit realm and being someone who is kind of on looking into business and working directly with businesses, much like INCIGHT, and I know some people on this call as well, um, is getting that experience from the outside in was really helpful, I believe, in now feeling really accountable to the work that I've done in the past, paving that way, so that now when I'm on the inside, I'm thinking about the experiences that I have been supporting people, and honestly, some of the barriers that do exist in the process, whether that be systems or lack of awareness. And so that's my role, is to continue to elevate that awareness. And I think help people to understand the nuances of disability too, and that every person is different. And so although we're creating these systems to support a wide variety of people, we still need to be nuanced in our approach and know that every person deserves a customized support. Okay, so happy to be here.
Awesome. Um, So this is our rundown just of kind of the topics that you can expect from me and Ryan to cover. I'm going to talk about your resume, transferable skills, the interview process, and impact statements throughout those processes. Ryan is going to talk about Nike plus DE&I focuses, accommodations, accommodation application statement, as well as Nike's inclusive networks. So those are kind of the main topics. But of course, like Grace said, if you have other questions that come up, we're going to have time at the end to answer those. I want to feel like you guys are getting all the information that you came here for today that we're ready to answer. And so feel free to hang on to those till the end, or throw them into the chat. And I know Grace will help us monitor, making sure that we can get those answered for you. All right. So just to kick it off, starting strong with your resume. I know nowadays it can kind of feel like you're sending your resume into a black hole. And so I did want to share some information today about, what it's like to be the recruiter on the other side. Believe it or not, there are people, myself or other recruiters, that do look at every single application that comes through Nike, which is, as you can imagine, quite a lot of applications. And so I wanted to share some information for job seekers on the call today about how to tee up your resume the best possible way that you can, to make sure that you're helping us kind of filter you through and making sure that you get pushed along to opportunities that you're qualified for and opportunities that you're excited about. And I feel one way that I like to kind of share this insight is that the very first interview that actually takes place in the application process is between the job description and your resume. A lot of people will read the job description, they'll tailor their resume a little bit, but really, if you look at the key requirements listed on a job description, and what background you need to have, what's nice to have, what you'll be accomplishing in that role, if your experiences on your resume aren't speaking to all, if not most of those on the job description, the interview is probably not going to go very well. So whenever you read kind of key requirements from a job description, make sure in any of your experiences listed on your resume that you are kind of speaking to that qualification for the role. And that's an easy way that helps candidates kind of navigate. One thing that's really important to know is that recruiters, more often than not, we actually don't write the job description for the role. We meet with the hiring manager. We talk about the team, what they work on, what key skill sets are needed to kind of hit the ground running. What are some nice to haves? What are kind of the needs of their team? And then they write the job description. And so as a recruiter, our job is to essentially kind of match up those key requirements with what's on your resume. And so making sure that those key requirements are listed on your resume, if you have that experience, is super important. It helps us make sure that you're a qualified candidate for the role, and kind of move you on to the next stage. Transferable skills come into this because in a lot of cases there is a list of really key hard skills, I guess you could say, but a majority of the skills required for each role are transferable skills, or skills that you could leverage in your day-to-day life, in school, at work, on sporting teams. And so making sure that those transferable skills are shared on your resume is so important. And that kind of leads into my next slide, which is transferable skills, and more so terminology. You can basically be saying the same thing on your resume as the job description, but using different terminology. And so it's really important that as you read the job description, that you are mimicking that same terminology. Recruiters are looking for those key words and key terms, to help it match you up for the opportunity. And I really like how this slide highlights kind of the strength versus the impact. So in the first bullet point says, describe how you did something with adjectives. So efficiently, exponential, collaboratively, and then you want to state the quantity. So what was the impact? How did that benefit the business? And so a lot of individuals will kind of put one or the other on their resume. They'll say, like, I provided growth by X%, or I worked collaboratively with a team. And you want to kind of combine those two. I worked collaboratively with a team on X project, which ended in this in percent increase. You want to state what happened, what your role was, and then what was the objective in each one of your examples that you share on your resume. Helps the recruiter know how effective you have been in the past, and how in line with the opportunity you are. And I'll move into my next slide, which is the interview. I just want to say, if you've made it past the application process, your recruiter has moved you into the interview, it's really important that all of you know that your recruiter wants you to win. We want you to get this opportunity. This is not a gauntlet to try to disqualify you. If a recruiter has qualified you for an opportunity, it means that they believe that you are worth sharing to their partner, to their hiring manager. And they believe that you are someone that the hiring manager should meet, your representation of their ability to qualify a candidate. And so please know that once you get to the interview, you've already accomplished a lot, and we are here to support you. And it's important to kind of reach out and communicate with your recruiter like they are your partner. Feel free to ask for tips and tricks and guidance. Ask about the personality of the hiring manager. Ask about, how to show up for that interview. We really are partners to our hiring managers, so working closely with your recruiter who believes in you is super important. The interview, best tip I have is to have your five ready. And when I say your five, I mean your five experiences that showcase the list of bullet points on the right side, your character, the transferable skills that were shared on the job description, related experiences, and your big wins. And a lot of people think that these five experiences need to just be work related. And oftentimes for more roles than not, we don't have the exact work experience, but we do have the life experience and the situations that we've been in throughout our lives that qualify us for the role. That's really what transferable skills are. So when I say pick your five, think of teams you've been a part of. That could be sporting teams, school activity teams. Think of opportunities where you showcased your character in a situation. A funny story that I like to share in interviews when the interviewer will ask a little bit about me or how I've shown up is when I was on a baseball team growing up, our team lost in the semifinals. And my coach at the end of the game said, all right, guys. Well, the next game doesn't really matter. We're not going to the championship. So, show up. I might show up, I might not, but, just kind of quit on our team. My mom always likes that I share this story because I emailed the coach afterwards and said, you signed up to be our coach. You told us that you were going to lead us till the end, and I expect you to show up. And I was probably 12 years old. But that's an example of a story where I held my leader accountable to something that they committed to. And it's really important that you remember that your interviewer is an actual person, like a person that has a life outside of work. We all have related experiences. So don't feel like the examples that you have to share in your interview have to just be work related. Showcase those types of stories so that your interviewer gets a kind of feel for who you are outside of work. Remember, we spend most of our time at our jobs, and at the end of the day, you just want to be someone that others want to be with and work around. There's a lot of skills that you guys can pick up and learn on the job, but showcasing that you're someone that has good character, someone that has the transferable skills to be successful in that role, can really be displayed through the experiences that you share. So have your five ready. Um, when we think of transferable skills or in the interview, um, I say have your five ready, but I do want you guys to know that it is okay to refer to the same story to answer multiple different questions. In every experience, there's more than one skill to pull from. And by repeating the same story, your interviewer already knows the situation because you've shared it before. And so they don't need as much time to learn what you're trying to say, so you can relate back to the same story multiple times to answer different questions, and that helps your interviewer get to know you a little better, helps you not get lost. I actually added to this slide, but for some reason it didn't save. So I will say it to you guys. The STAR method is one that you've probably heard, and it's not one that's not needed today. It's still something that people should practice. And if you haven't heard of the STAR method, it allows you to, STAR method is an acronym. And I know I'm going to get lost when I say this, but you state the situation, you state your action, I believe it is. And then you state what the resolution was. So when they ask the tell me about a time question, you use the STAR method, state what the situation was, how you acted, and what the resolution of the situation was. And that helps you kind of streamline your answers and not ramble and make sure that you're answering what the interviewer is asking you. At the end of the day, we want the interview to flow. We want you to be able to present yourself the best that you can. We all know that interviews are nerve-wracking. And so settling in, making it a comfortable environment, sharing some stories that showcase who you are, is the whole point. And know that from the interviewer to the recruiter to the hiring manager, we all want you to win. We want you to get this opportunity, and want you to have a great interview experience. All right, impact statements. And this kind of ties into what I shared earlier, but from retail employment to organizational leadership to student athlete, these are all types of experiences that you can talk about and that can be displayed on your resume and that you can talk about in your interview. So making sure that you're sharing on your resume that you're a retail employee, and making sure that you elaborate on your resume what your actual action for that was. And so the upper quadrant kind of keeps things simple, but you can expound a little bit more on the quadrant below. So instead of just saying you were a member of the basketball team, you would expound on that, stating, I committed 30 hours and I practiced and studied. So I was able to multitask and juggle more things at once. I played while maintaining a full course load. Those are all transferable skills that you're stating. And so there's a lot the hiring manager and the recruiter can pull from that rather than just saying you were a member of the basketball team. Awesome. I've kind of rambled a little bit, but I guess we can do a couple questions. Did we get any questions in the chat?
No,
No.
not
Okay.
yet. Someone did share your STAR method, which was great.
Thank you. Sorry, I got a little bit lost there. Thank you, Mary. Awesome. Lee, did you have a question?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So you talk about life experience, and this is the part where I have actually not gotten through past a recruiter, because I am a peer support specialist because of my disabilities. So I've done that training, and then I have my life experiences that, you know, you understand, I think. And then when I talk to a recruiter, they still feel like they want that hard data that you had a manager and somebody was managing you, and they want to see that. And I know that there's a paradigm shift happening now with life experience, and maybe it's just going to take time, but I was curious if you had any other tips, or like talking to a recruiter to, yeah, I think maybe I've gotten my point across. Sorry, I don't want to ramble too much.
No, you're okay. I think it's when you're talking to a recruiter, remembering that they are not trying to disqualify you, but they are trying to qualify you for the opportunity. And so if a recruiter is trying to kind of lock in some parameters, they're just trying to imagine the situation or put themselves in the situation to make sure that you're qualified based off what the hiring manager had shared with them. And so if I'm understanding your point correctly, and I apologize if I'm not, if they are asking, what type of manager experience you have worked under or had, it's just that they're trying to understand, how you would, fit into this situation. So if you ever feel like you're answering a question that's not what the recruiter wants to hear, following up with a question, it's okay to ask your answer a question with a question for your recruiter before answering, if that makes sense. Cool. I'll answer one more question and then we'll get to Ryan's side, and then any other questions we'll hold till the end. We'll definitely have time at the end for more questions. I think Kate was next.
Okay, yeah, I have a quick question. So first of all, I love your story about coaching, and that's great. Great example of to show your power outside of necessarily your work history. I like that, who you are as a person. But my question is I work with a lot of clients from Commission for the Blind and also from VR. And I just was curious if people wanted to ask some qualifying questions before they even apply for a job, is there an email for that? Because there might be a valid reason, something that's not in the job description, why that job would not be a match for the person. And so
Yeah.
they want to spend the time for your, I'm not gonna, how do I say this? You don't want to pursue something that's not going to work out for the employer or the employee. Is there an
Yeah.
email you have to ask those kinds of questions?
Yeah, that might be an answer for Ryan. I know he's going to cover some of the accommodations that we have even through the application process for candidates, prior to getting into any interview process. So if he doesn't cover that in his part of the presentation, we'll definitely circle back. But I know that we do have accommodations for that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, Kate, that's a great question. I worked quite a bit with OCB, Oregon Commission of the Blind, in the past, in past roles I've held, and so I know that yes, like sometimes there's a hesitation to want to throw yourself into something if you're not sure. And I would say this is that hopefully, yeah, to Matt's point, if the question is around accommodations, then it might be answered, but we could get more detailed and be happy to talk to you more. I mean, even off this call, if you have some questions. We don't always, I mean, Matt knows more than I do as far as where the roles are at and what kind of roles are open. But I think I'm more of like a higher level, like knowing what accommodations exist and then knowing more or less, the teams that operate and can help to give some feedback, if that's helpful.
No, that would be wonderful. So you
Yeah.
would be the person maybe that we start with to ask basic questions about accommodation. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
Great
Well,
question.
we'll get into Ryan's part of the slide.
Yep.
Oh, there
Cool.
we go.
I just want to say, Amber, we saw your hand earlier, and so yeah, would love to chat with you after this section as well. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Matt. I think I love hearing about your perspective, and that I think it's really cool, and that you clarified that asking questions to a recruiter is an important piece and is okay. Because I think whether it's around accommodation or you want to know like that question around, what is the kind of communication style, I think, or of the manager, like the hiring manager. I think I've asked that question before of like, what do you think is helpful to know about this person that's going to be interviewing me or this panel that's interviewing me? And I've gotten really great answers because the recruiters are working so closely with those hiring managers. It goes both ways. Like they want to set those hiring managers up for success. But helping you to best prepare is going to get you there as well. The one thing I'll just add anecdotally too is that in prepping, I'm a big fan of mock interviews as well. Before any job I've ever interviewed for, there's one particular friend who loves doing it, and she will go through my resume, and it's like something she enjoys. So if you have a friend like that, great. But a partner or a family member, I think that can be really helpful just to be like, here's some questions I really want to get down, like those big five that Matt mentioned, having those ready to go, and then practicing them with somebody who will ask you those questions. And also a job developer too. I know that can be really helpful as well. So very, very helpful, Matt. So thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, I get to follow up on this. We'll talk about some accommodations, and then in general, just talking a little bit more about, the commitment to inclusion that Nike has. Me coming into a corporation from nonprofit, I will say that I think a healthy amount of apprehension sometimes I have approaching this work because the world is huge and Nike is really huge as well. And I would say, full of so many people that once they know, they'll do it well. And in this case, around how do we create the most inclusive process for, in this case, in this conversation, candidates with disabilities and employees with disabilities. I've seen a lot more effort in the past couple of years by some examples are the accessibility team that I sit on was created now about 3.5 years ago and was incorporated into the diversity, equity, and inclusion team. Whereas depending on where you look in different organizations, it may exist on its own. It could be in legal, it could be in sometimes technology. It really depends, I think, on the business. But to me, that shows the commitment that whereas we're creating programs and we're doing a lot of training on DEI, accessibility and then disability inclusion is included in that. So it's not just these standalone separate kind of conversations. We have really great teammates that are on the DEI team who are taking all of the topics and all the intersectionality that pertains to DEI and pertains to accessibility and bringing that to the business and the teams that they work with. One recent example too is this is was publicly announced last September at the Olympic Games, the Paralympic Games in Paris in 2024, is that we launched a new program called the Game On program. And that is a program that worked specifically with the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee to ensure that we were really setting up this program to know that any teams we work with through this program understand disability inclusion, accessibility, accommodations, and supported many candidates to find roles for that program. It started with just a small group of 5 in the cohort, but those teammates joined in actually just this month started, and most of them actually came from the Paralympics. So some are currently competing in the US for Team USA for the Paralympics. That just bring that up as an example because that was also a great opportunity to support candidates with communicating the transferable skills, as Matt said, taking from sport into what it looks like in the business. So that's pretty important because if you have a non-traditional background, and that could be in this case in sport, and you've been competing and that's been your job for years, maybe that has led you to not pursue secondary education potentially, or at the bachelor level or beyond. But your experiences as an athlete are really, really pertinent, especially to Nike, but they're pertinent because of what you've honed as far as the skill sets and the background in competing. And I think that's true across the board in any non-traditional background as well. So again, Matt, I appreciate the way that you talked about non-work experiences and how you can pull out those skills to communicate why you're a good fit for the role. Okay, do you mind going to the next slide, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so in accommodations, one thing that many may not know is that Nike does have a dedicated accommodations team who are internal. And then we also work with a third party as well to support because it's a small team. But I think it's important to know that we do have an internal team that is very, very experienced in this topic. And it's not only that they're really knowledgeable in the Americans with Disabilities Act to know specifically what the requirements and the responsibility is as it pertains to law. But I think for me, more important than that is understanding the nuances and the diversity within the disability community to know that just because someone requests a certain level of support in the application or interview process doesn't mean that that's going to be the same for everybody. So Oregon Commission for the Blind was mentioned recently. Because somebody has vision loss or has low vision or is blind, everyone experiences that differently. So the type of solution that's going to support that person will vary. And what I have been really encouraged by is this team that does strike a great nuance. Again, having the background of the law, but also just having the background of working directly with people very frequently to support them in the interview and also in their employment once they find a job. In addition to that, we've done a lot of work collaborating and actually making sure that we're bringing that accommodations team to a lot of different partners. And this recently, there's been a large effort to get all the information around accommodations internally to all of our recruiting teams, because you may know this, but Nike worldwide, we're about 80,000 employees. So, and then you have a team of now at this point, 2 or 3 people that are handling all accommodations. That's in the US currently, so it's not 80,000 in the US. But it's not surprising to know that, people who work here frequently don't know what other teams do a lot. You can get siloed in general in your work, but in this case, many people don't know about accommodations. The last thing you want is for a teammate to not feel equipped that when someone asks about an accommodation, that the response is, I'm not sure, let me get back to you on that. That's an okay response, I would say. I'm not going to throw shade at people that say that versus saying no. But what we want is to say, you know what? Yeah, we do have a process, and I'm going to support you with that. So that way, the candidate in disclosing an accommodation request, that also is, part of potentially the self-identification process and disclosure, that once you're revealing that, there is a very real and perceptive risk to talking about that. And what we want is that when someone does disclose, if they are requesting accommodation, or you just say, I have a disability, this is how I communicate, this is how I process. Those types of conversations should be really, really safe with all of the teammates that you interface with at Nike. So we're doing regular cycles to make sure, again, that especially our recruiting teams understand that we have an accommodations team, we have a process, and it's meant to be very seamless so that candidates with disabilities are not spending more time on their accommodations requests than they are on what they should be doing, which is focusing on getting those big five that Matt mentioned and getting prep for that interview.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this next slide, so this is actually more of it's couple part. I want to make sure that anyone who's joining right now, whether you can see the screen or not, for any reason, that I'm being an accessible presenter by reading the whole slide, which I know but death by PowerPoint, I think, is what I've heard for PowerPoint slides that you read the whole thing. I'll just say kind of the PSA is, if you put it on a slide, make sure you cover it. It doesn't have to be verbatim, but this I think is important because this language I'm about to read, recently we were able to move it from, on our careers site that I showed a screenshot of, which is careers.nike.com. It used to kind of be hard to find the language and know if you need to request an accommodation in the application or interview process, where do you go? And I had a hard time finding it when I first started. So now this is included currently in the first wave in all US based corporate roles, which is very large part of our population. And so this is in the job description. And the last thing I'll say before I read it is that I think this is important signaling, not just if you do want to request an accommodation, but for anybody who is reviewing a job description, sees the commitment to disability inclusion and accommodations and accessibility, because as they're going through their job description, whether or not they need it, they see it there. And as I would just say younger generations now coming up into the workforce have a value of DEI and accessibility and inclusion in work. And so this shows that our teams are committed to it. So here is the language I want to read verbatim, which is, we are committed to fostering a diverse and inclusive environment for all employees and job applicants. We offer a number of accommodations to complete our interview process, including screen readers, sign language interpreters, accessible and single location for in-person interviews, closed captioning, and other reasonable modifications as needed. If you discover as you navigate our application process that you need assistance or an accommodation due to a disability, please complete the hyperlink candidate accommodation request form, which takes somebody to the form, which automatically creates a ticket for the team, the accommodations team, and we have a team that processes all candidate interviews and requests. It'll go to them, creates a ticket so they are accountable in a queue to respond to it, right? It's not going to an email box. You don't leave a message to say, hey, I'm hoping someone calls me back. So for me, that was a really important step. And also listing out some specific examples and then other modifications as needed as well. So just wanted to share that.
Awesome.
Cool. So this next piece, there's a screenshot right now of our career site again, and it's under the DEI tab. And the DEI tab is under actually our purpose section, which talks more about our commitments as Nike internally to the communities that make up Nike, and understanding that, we're talking about accommodations, we're talking about the interview process, but what happens when you get here? Who are your people and where's your community you can connect with? We have 8 different Nike United networks, and the networks are all employee-led. They have a structure of leadership within them, and they're really responsible largely for doing what they want and for their community, but they're accountable to their community. They also are really, I think, powerful drivers for change within the organization. That, for instance, one example of a network is the Disability Network. And we work closely with them to understand what they are hearing as far as trends, hearing, observing, seeing, witnessing, so that they can bring things up. That if there was an event that could have been more accessible, we're working with them to see what went wrong and how can we help. And then we can be a conduit into Nike and into like the business, I should say the team that ran that event, for instance. And I'd like to think we do it in a very mindful way and not, I think we don't point the finger, we raise our hand to help them. But some other networks I just wanted to mention, there's 8 networks. The Ascend Network and Friends, that's the Asian and Pacific Islander Network, Black Employee Network and Friends, Disability Network, Latino and Friends Network. We have the Pride Network, Women of Nike, Military Veterans, and the Native American Network. I think that was all 8. Yeah. Cool. So again, there's intersectionality within that, and anybody can join that is an employee, and you can join all the networks that you want to. They put on amazing events and awareness events. We're doing one this week with a disability network that's focused on deaf and hard of hearing awareness for our internal employees. So just wanted to mention that I think it's a cool opportunity to have peer support so that if there's those questions, when you become an employee that you don't know who to ask, it's a very vibrant Slack channel that they operate on that answer all people's questions around accommodations, around resources in the community. Sometimes someone says, hey, my child was just diagnosed with a specific diagnosis. Does anybody have any resources of places I can go and reach out and help? So it really varies. But anyway, I think that was really what we wanted to share as far as some process and then also some of the cultural components of disability inclusion. And yeah, I think we have some more time for questions. That was my last slide, like, right, Matt? I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
End of slide. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess we need to go
And
back to Amber, right? She had a.
Yes, Amber.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, you answered some of my questions, but I guess I kind of am circling back. You know, a lot of us are here because maybe we have disabilities and have faced hardships in the past when it came to employment. I know for myself, a lot of my experience, when I'm asked about experiences in interviews, it's difficult for me not to relate back to the experiences that I've had when it comes to my disability. And I guess I'm kind of in this space right now where I haven't had employment in about 5 years, COVID, and then I had a child, and then and she has disabilities. And so I went ahead and I went back to school during that time. And now when I try to present, looking at getting, a future position, I just feel like I don't know when in the interview process to disclose that I might need an accommodation down the road, because it's not necessarily one that's, I have chronic illness, unfortunately, and somewhat invisible. So
Yeah.
that being said, what do you suggest on that? It's just difficult, I feel like, to not have that included as a part of my experience, or to not have that be brought up in the interview, because it just relates to so much that I am.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I understand too, as far as the identity conversation and it's all interwoven, right? And so how we do hear quite a bit, like, how do we show up our best self in this environment and our full self? And the reality is, and what I think you're touching on, Amber, is that that's not always the case. Not everyone feels that sense that they can say, here I am fully. And in fact, sometimes it's not to our benefit, no matter what you're disclosing, to be the full self right away. It's like making a splash instead of causing some ripples. But when it comes to an accommodation, I think absolutely, like, if the accommodation is needed in the interview process, and that's going to be something that you are going to need to complete that process, then absolutely, I think bringing it up. I think that if you don't know about, like, okay, let's figure out more about the job and then I'll request accommodations. If you feel comfortable with that, I think that's totally fine, because I personally, when talking with teams, I have gotten the question, we didn't know about this accommodation request in the interview process, but now we're hearing about it. And what we say is, yeah, that totally makes sense. Everybody in the process of interviewing, no matter who you are, is always trying to game it a little bit and make sure that you just give yourself the best possible shot and you avoid any perceived risk around saying anything. But if you do need it in the process, I will say our teams are absolutely here to support, and I believe won't bat an eye at that. So, but also in your experiences, like you said, are really relevant in answering questions as well, like the transferable skills. Like you as a caregiver, as a parent, as a student, all of those things take really important skills that are absolutely relevant in the process. So I guess number one, Amber, I just want to validate that that is that is really hard to know when to do that. But I'll just ask the question back. Does that perspective help, or do you want? I mean, also Matt, happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I was going to chime in there too, just to say that when you say that, your experience with your chronic disability does make up a huge part of your life. It makes up a huge part of the experiences and how you might answer some of those transferable skill questions, like the tell me about a time questions, which is amazing. And you should, because it does make up a huge part. And I think for a recruiter, it's all about how you frame it. It's all about, hey, this is the obstacle that I was faced with. This is how my disability played into that. And this was the outcome. This is how I overcame that. This is how I have showed up. That resolution and how you're framing the answer to your question is always so important. We want to hear what the obstacle was, but at the end of the day, we also want to hear how you overcame that, or how you kind of position yourself in work situations now with with that constant obstacle in place, because that allows you, just like Ryan said, to kind of cut out any negated risk. With every single person, there's always risk. Is really, we don't know how, whether you have a disability or not, we don't know how anyone's going to show up really in a position till they're in the position. So you being able to showcase that any obstacle that is related to your disability that you're faced with, but you have always been able to overcome it, or you're able to kind of change the way that you do work to complete things with that disability, is going to be huge. And also, when you're sharing these situations, like I said earlier, make sure that your recruiter is understanding what you're saying and have them speak back to you. Hey, so when you're talking to a recruiter, if you're talking to me, I would really appreciate if you said, hey, Matt, would you mind kind of sharing what you took away from that, what I just shared with you? Making sure that I, as the recruiter, am relaying the message that you want the hiring manager to hear. I always tell my candidates to make sure, because when I'm presenting my candidates, especially those that have a disability, I want to be able to share your background in the most positive light that I possibly can. And so making sure that I'm reiterating your experience the best that I can is super important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And not to spend too much time on it, Amber, but I think it's important, I think really relevant. In transferable situation, I'll just say to you taking, I mean, not time away, you've been living your life and doing really important things. Continue to be a student while being a parent, and being a caregiver. Those are really important skills that I would say position. I would hope that, talking to a recruiter about this, that you taking time away from the formal workforce actually allows you maybe to have a more refreshed perspective versus somebody who just went from job to job to job. Like, I think that there can be value sometimes placed on, you just worked last week and now you're ready to work here. But I'm like, why were you leaving? Are you burnt out? And that you're hoping for a solution versus, hey, like, I've taken some time away to do really important things for my life. Here they are. And also, I continue to be a student and continue to keep my mind sharp and moving me forward educationally, and intellectually, and keeping myself stimulated. I'm ready to go, because of that. So yeah. But again, happy to talk with you more, Amber, if something comes up. And if you find a role that you're interested in, please connect us with us and we can be happy to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eileen is asking, what if you don't know what type of accommodation to request?
Yeah. Eileen, that's a great question. I think that's where and it depends on where it is. Like, I think if you know that there's like a barrier in the application process. So for instance, if the application that you're going for, this should not be at Nike, but anywhere else, that it's not accessible, for instance, or you're not sure how to fill it out, then you're faced with, okay, in order for me to complete this, I am going to need an accommodation, and that's the time to request. If you can complete that, no problem, get through that, And in the interview, then you're thinking about, is the accommodation going to allow me to be successful in the interview, or remove a barrier in the interview? So for some, in our cases, if you know that it's an in-person interview and you're going to want a accessible, which all buildings are accessible on campus, but you're going to want a first floor meeting room. That's going to help you just to approach the building and make sure it's super easy for you. Then you know, okay, that's a need that I have. Sometimes I think it's totally okay too to ask what kinds of accommodations are available as well, just in general. But I think for me, it's based on specifically what the need is. And then to the question earlier, when do you disclose? If you don't think that you need something to remove a barrier in the process, then just keep going. And then as you find out when they propose a certain job task or location to you, that would be the time when it starts to become a little more clear. I feel like someone just put in made job accommodation network. Yeah, there's 8. Okay. Yeah, Gabrielle, cool. But I think Job Accommodation Network is a really great resource as well. It's jan.org, I believe. Askjan.org. Have a lot of examples.
So Peg has a two-part question. Where can prospective employees get the language needed to speak to their disability? And where can we learn about the types of accommodations that are reasonable to request?
So let's see, the language. Well, let me first start with the second question, because that's a little easier and it kind of goes off what we just said, which is to me, Peg, and to our accommodations team, if you're requesting it, it's reasonable. And then we'll work with you to evaluate how that's going to play out. That's what I've seen is that, again, they've built out their background, but they're also always learning, like, so not, asking a teammate, have you heard of Oregon Commission for the Blind and the fact that they offer orientation and mobility training on campus? And they were like, no, but we'd love to learn more and work with them. So if you believe it's reasonable and it will allow you to be successful in this process, it is reasonable. And there is an evaluation process too, but I think, if you need it, request it, and talk with your recruiter about that. The language to speak about your disability, it's a good question. I mean, it's about your own experience and how you'd like to frame it. I think looking at ways, I think it goes off of what Matt, you were talking about, is how do you take the strengths out of your experience? We were just having that conversation with Amber as well. So developing kind of, in as much as you want to disclose how your identity is your disability, or disability is part of your identity or is your identity, that is yourself. So how do you want to tell that story in a way that encourages awareness for the person, that they understand more about you, and also is in a very strength-based approach as well. Matt, do you have anything to add to that as far as?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say to lean in a little bit more on, helping educating your recruiter a little bit. More often than not, some recruiters haven't had to work with candidates that need accommodations. Some of them have, some of them haven't. And so using it as an opportunity to educate your recruiter so they understand. And what's helped me in the past is to share, here have been my limitations in the past. This is how organizations have helped me or assisted me in the past, or here's how I overcome those limitations on my own. And this is how I've been able to show up. Educating your recruiter on what the limitations are, how you overcome those limitations, whether that's assistance by the organization, how you need them to show up, and also what you do on your own to overcome those limitations, to educate the recruiter on, hey, me as a recruiter, if I truly believe this is the right candidate and they're qualified, I am here to help you get over those limitations the best that I possibly can, and make sure that you're showing up to the hiring manager the best that you possibly can. Remembering that the recruiter is accountable to the hiring manager, but we are also accountable to each of our candidates as well. And so making sure you're communicating, Matt, this is what I need to show up to my interview the best I can. What can you do? And I honestly believe that you be hell-bent to find an organization better than Nike that is not going to try to accommodate you. We find so much strength in DE&I We truly believe that our teams are the most innovative. They are the most strategic and strong because of our D&I lens, because we don't count out individuals that others might. We truly believe that finding strength in diversity and experience is what helps us innovate the best products for our athletes. And so remember that your recruiter has that mindset. We want you on this team because of your experience. So help us understand what that experience is, what assistance you need, and then we'll get through the finish line together.
So SW has a comment here. My disability is not necessarily visible, and I've always disclosed during the interview process. I understand that Nike honors DEI, but that's now under attack by many companies. How would you suggest navigating this new landscape?
A great question. Yeah, that's the elephant in the room, right? With a lot of these conversations. There's a lot going on, and what I can say, being a part of the DEI team, nothing has changed with the Nike DEI team. It is the same, and the work is the same. And so, as far as an individual approach, I would say that I wouldn't. It's okay. I mean, it's on all of our minds, right? You can't stay away from it. You can't ignore it. And also, as far as an individual, I would not have that change your approach personally. So if you feel comfortable and think it's important to disclose during the interview, keep on doing that without a worry. Even if it is relevant, it absolutely is about the person who's receiving it on their own opinions about it. But I can speak at least for our team is that nothing has changed in that. And that's not going to all of a sudden be oh, we're thinking about this differently. And now we're thinking differently about how we interface with candidates. Absolutely not.
And that's why we work here.
Yeah.
It would be hard for me to work with an organization that doesn't view the DEI the way that Nike does. And I absolutely love being here because of, that lens and the work that Ryan does to make sure that we're finding the absolute best candidates, whether they need accommodations or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say too that in the chat, I appreciate the collaboration within what's going on right now, like all of you supporting each other and putting resources in. So for a lot of these questions, it's a crowdsourced answer with a lot of these. So I appreciate everyone adding, other notes.
Absolutely. And I figured that this was going to be a great discussion because, it is out front right now and people are hoping for change. And, I'm impressed with your guys' accommodations process and, your network resources and all that. I mean, I hope other companies, would want to stand up to that same level. And I do have somebody that's asking Ryan about how they would get a hold of you.
Yeah.
Is it that all right to just share your email or?
Definitely. I will say just be patient with my response. But absolutely, I'm happy to give out my email. Thank you for asking.
And everyone feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I will get back to you. As you can imagine, there's quite a few connection requests coming through, but I would love to connect with each and every one of you and assist in any way I can, whether you're applying for an opportunity that I'm the recruiter on or, having me give you any helpful advice. Like I said in my presentation, I want you to win. And I want Nike to have the most diverse, strong team that we possibly can. And so, however I can help that happen, I absolutely want to.
And I believe there are people here too that aren't necessarily applying to Nike, but just the title was intriguing to them. And they came in to learn a little bit more, about how you guys are operating and dealing with these situations. And hopefully that would help them, with whoever they apply for, whatever company they are going to and seeking help.
Yeah.
So it is 11 o'clock. If there is any absolute question that hasn't been answered and talked about, we'd be glad to, open it up for one more question. I do want to be mindful of my hosts here and not overuse their time.
I'm replying to a couple in the chat as well, but it looks like Berenia has a question.
All right.
Yes, I wanna be very quickly. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I have clients that with disabilities and other ones with English barrier. So is that, I really wanna like kind of meet with you. I support people in the city of Gresham and some in Portland. Is that possible that I can meet with you and like go from there?
Yeah, Matt, I'm wondering about
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I think meeting in person is kind of hard. So I would say like definitely request a connection with me on LinkedIn, or you can get my email and I'm happy to connect with you there. I do need to save like my in-person time for candidates that are in the process or candidates that I'm working with. But if we have qualified candidates that you're representing, that I can help kind of curate as they're applying for roles or getting into the interview process, that's when I would love to kind of meet with you in person. But I do have to kind of tailor my time for candidates that are currently in the interview process. But I am happy to answer any questions via email or LinkedIn.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
same here,
Great.
Berenia. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matthew and Ryan. This was a wonderful presentation, and I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did. And also to everybody that participated, thank you so much. I will be sending out an email with the recording, and I will include Matt's email in that and Matthew's LinkedIn URL. And hopefully there'll be more connections. And I wish everybody, the best of luck. We all need a good job, and we all need a job we love, and a job that pays our bills. And so that's a real important thing. And even though some of our programs just gear to people just with disabilities, our employment department is open to anybody. We consider not having a job a barrier. And so just want to thank you so much. And hopefully we will see you at the job fair coming up or at our next Get Ahead event.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you so much
everybody.
for
Really
having us.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you, everyone. Bye. Have a good day.